What you are about to hear does not appear on any international network newscast. What I am going to reveal to you today, April 2nd, 2026, is the information that Washington, Tel Aviv, and the corporate media have decided to bury. Because if the entire world knows it, the house of cards they call victory collapses within hours. Welcome to Professor Jian Wei Explains. Tonight I am not bringing you an analysis. I am bringing you the truth, unfiltered, without makeup, without the diplomatic varnish that great powers use to put consciences to sleep. Exactly 34 days have passed since the first American and Israeli missiles crossed Iranian airspace. 34 days since the world woke up to a war nobody voted for, nobody chose, nobody asked for. And in those 34 days, the most powerful networks on the planet have sold you a single narrative: that the United States is winning, that Iran is on its knees, that oil will flow free. But there is something none of those channels dares to tell you, and it is this: all of that is a lie. A lie so enormous, so manufactured, so sustained by the money and interests of a few that to keep it standing, they have had to silence journalists, censor footage, and block satellite signals across 3 separate continents. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to hear does not only change the way you understand this war, it changes the way you understand the world. Let us talk first about the Strait of Hormuz, because this is the story that enrages Pentagon planners the most, and that they hide the most carefully. When Trump went on air 3 weeks ago to say the strait was under Allied control, that commercial vessels were circulating normally, I will tell you what is behind that declaration: pure desperation. Commercial vessel traffic through the Strait of Hormuz dropped by 95%. I am not saying that. The International Energy Agency is saying it. Lloyd's List Intelligence confirms it. The Associated Press corroborates it. 95%. Do you know what that means in real terms? It means the equivalent of 20 million barrels of oil per day. 20% of the entire planet's energy supply stopped moving normally. But now comes the part that international networks will never tell you. Iran did not close the strait. Iran did something far more intelligent, far more lethal to Washington's interests. Iran turned the Strait of Hormuz into a toll booth, its own toll booth. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps installed a transit control system that works as follows. If you want to cross the strait with your oil tanker, you first need to request authorization from the command of Hormozgan province, which reports directly to the guards. You need to declare the origin of your cargo, its destination, the composition of your crew. That process is called geopolitical verification. Once approved, the vessel does not navigate the International Central Channel. It navigates Iranian territorial waters, skirting the island, escorted by armed fastboats, and the price of that passage reaches $500,000 per vessel. And here is what makes my pulse quicken when I say it. Those hundreds of millions of dollars are not paid in US dollars. They are paid in Chinese yuan. Stop for a moment. Let that land. The channel through which 20% of the world's oil flows is being charged for in Beijing's currency. And meanwhile, the petrodollar system, that great invention of 1974 that forced the entire world to buy dollars in order to buy oil, is bleeding from a wound with no closure. Economist Antonio Bardwatch in the Foreign Affairs forums calls what Iran achieved in the Strait the most effective financial revolution since Bretton Woods. He does not say it with admiration. He says it with the coldness of someone who sees on a board that a piece that seemed minor has just put the king in check. But wait, because what I have just revealed about the Strait is only the first chapter of this story. And the second chapter happened in a place the international media refused to show on screen. On March 29, 2026, a Sunday afternoon, an Iranian missile struck the Niyat Hovav industrial zone in southern Israel, near Beersheba. The Israel Defense Forces declared that the missile had been partially intercepted and that the damage was minimal and controlled. Now I will tell you what actually happened. According to reports filtered through independent Latin American and Asian media, the missile was not intercepted in time. Its enormous, burning fragments fell directly onto one of the most sensitive industrial complexes in southern Israel, a complex with more than 40 chemical production and dual-use technology plants. The impact generated a monumental explosion, a fireball visible for kilometers, and then a cloud, a black, dense cloud that began expanding over the Negev desert. The authorities of Israel's Homefront Command ordered immediate evacuation. Residents of Beersheba received instructions to seal their windows and doors with adhesive tape to prevent gas infiltration. The air, said emergency technicians, was unbreathable because what was burning in that plant included industrial ammonia and chemical precursors that, in combustion, release toxic compounds. This was not a minor industrial fire. It was an environmental catastrophe that Israel censored with terrifying effectiveness. A senior international media executive, whose name I cannot reveal for their safety, stated privately that the footage of the Niyat Hovav fire was blocked by the Israeli Military Censorship Board before any foreign correspondent could transmit it. I ask you directly, what kind of victory needs to hide its own catastrophes? Now comes the revelation that cost me the most to process. What the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps did on March 31st permanently changed the definition of what a combatant is in the 21st century. They issued an official communique declaring 18 American technology corporations as legitimate military targets. 18. I will give you the names because you have the right to know them. Apple, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Intel, Oracle, IBM, Boeing, Cisco, HP, Dell, JP Morgan Chase, General Electric, Tesla, Nvidia, Palantir, and in that same communique, they warned that starting April 1st, all physical installations of those companies in the Middle East would be targets for neutralization. They urged employees to abandon their workplaces. They urged the civilian population to move at least 1 kilometer away from those companies' offices and data centers. Why did Iran arrive at this decision? Because Iranian intelligence has in its possession information linking companies like Palantir and its predictive analysis algorithms to the planning of the February 28th decapitation strikes. Facial recognition algorithms that tracked the movements of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Artificial intelligence platforms that processed the Guard's encrypted communications to identify movement patterns. Cloud infrastructure that enabled real-time processing of satellite surveillance to guide precision munitions. The line between civilian technology company and accomplice in a targeted assassination operation ceased to exist in this war, and the New York stock exchanges understood that immediately. Shares of Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Palantir fell within minutes. Investors read the map before analysts do. Let us now talk about what happened inside Iran, because the major media presented it in a way that completely distorts reality. The calculation of the architects of the February 28th operation was as follows. Eliminate Ali Khamenei and the 50 key officials of the security apparatus, and it would trigger the collapse of the regime. An Iran shaken by mass protests in more than 210 cities, hit by economic crisis, fractured by accumulated internal tensions, that Iran, without its supreme leader, would fragment. That was the calculation. That was the script Trump repeated to his electoral base. But the reality they are hiding from you is that exactly the opposite happened. The elimination of Khamenei did not fragment Iran. It consolidated the hardest faction of the system into absolute power. The Assembly of Experts convened in emergency session, and in a move that many independent analysts describe as the most important institutional seizure of power since the 1979 revolution, designated as new Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei, the Ayatollah's second son, 56 years old. A man who for decades operated in the shadows, who does not appear on television, who gives no interviews, whose messages arrive through intermediaries, a figure designed to be unreachable, unlocatable, the dream of a security state made flesh. And when Trump declared that Mojtaba was an unacceptable choice and that the United States should decide who governs Iran, that colonial declaration gave the new supreme leader a legitimacy that no internal speech could have manufactured. Because in Iran, as in any nation with historical pride, telling a people they cannot choose their leaders is the most effective way to unite them. Now let me talk to you about what is happening in the streets of the power that supposedly is winning this war. A gallon of gasoline in the United States costs today between $4.20 and $4.10 on the national average. In California, it reached $5.89. A gallon of diesel, the fuel that moves trucks, tractors, hospital generators, is up 49.7% annually. It is at $7.52 in California. This has no precedent since the oil crisis of the 1970s. Unilever froze all its U.S. hiring for 3 months. Private credit default indices reached 9.2%, the highest level since 2008. The word that economists avoid pronouncing publicly, but that everyone repeats privately, is this: stagflation. Inflation plus recession. The worst possible economic scenario. And it is knocking on the door of the world's largest economy. And do you know who Trump blames for all of this? Europe, his NATO allies, because France, Germany, and the United Kingdom initially refused to send warships to force the opening of the strait. And Trump's response was to threaten to cut the supply of weapons to Ukraine if the Europeans did not join his naval coalition in the Persian Gulf, using Ukrainian blood as bargaining currency. That happened. A full-scale act of blackmail that not a single primetime newscast described with that word. The British Prime Minister even pronounced 3 words that Washington never expected to hear. This is not our war. But in the end, with diesel prices threatening a supply crisis and oil companies informing governments that reserves would not hold more than 6 weeks, the Europeans yielded. They capitulated to the blackmail, not out of conviction, but out of energy survival. That is how real power works, not with principles, with gasoline bills. South of the equator, the consequences are hitting with brutality. A barrel of oil surpassed $116. The International Monetary Fund describes the impact for importing countries in the global south as a sudden and massive tax on the incomes of their populations. In Colombia, inflation returned to 5.4%, and the central bank raised rates to 11.25. In Mexico, President Claudia Sheinbaum launched emergency subsidy packages to prevent gasoline prices from spiking to levels the population cannot absorb. Spain, meanwhile, took the only sovereign decision that a European government had the courage to execute. Pedro Sanchez closed Spanish airspace to U.S. military aircraft participating in the operation against Iran. Not words against the war, but concrete consequences with the real political cost that saying no to Washington implies. The data you will not see in the newscasts says the following. In the first month of this war, at least 1,574 Iranian civilians were killed, 236 of them children. In Lebanon, the dead exceeded 1,300. The regional total surpasses 4,800, according to independent humanitarian organizations. 4,800 human beings, each with a name, a family, a history, converted into statistics by Pentagon press releases. In Israel, tens of thousands of citizens took to the streets of Tel Aviv, demanding a ceasefire. Ultra-Orthodox confronting police in Bnei Brak over forced conscription. The internal fracture of a society asking out loud what its leaders do not want to answer. How long and at what price? Marco Rubio said on April 1st that the finish line is visible but not immediate, which in diplomatic language means there is no exit strategy. The Center for Strategic and International Studies calculates that in the first 4 weeks, more than 850 Tomahawk missiles were used. The Royal United Services Institute in London calculated that in the first 16 days of war, 11,294 units of munitions were consumed at a value of $26 billion. And the production of new Tomahawks cannot recover those levels in less than years. Years, not months. The superpower's arsenal has a limit, and that limit is approaching faster than Washington will publicly admit. And meanwhile, today, Iran is still exporting oil, 1,600,000 barrels daily toward China's independent refineries, exactly the same as it was exporting before the bombardments. The economic strangulation strategy that Washington designed to bring Tehran to its knees is working in reverse. The one being strangled, though it has not yet admitted it, is the monetary system that for 50 years sustained the hegemony of the dollar. I want to close with a question that is not rhetorical. If this war ends tomorrow, if Trump announces a ceasefire in the next few hours, what will have permanently changed, and what will never be able to work as it did before? The petrodollar already has a crack that does not close with a peace communiqué. Technology consortiums have already been declared combatants for the first time in history. NATO alliances already showed they are sustained by fear and not by conviction. And Mojtaba Khamenei already proved that the Iran of 2026 does not collapse when you kill its leader. It mutates, it hardens, it learns. Next week, if the sources we follow are correct, there will be a diplomatic move by an Asian power that could completely reconfigure the conditions of any agreement. A power that until now has remained silent while its ships cross the Hormuz toll booth, paying in its own currency. We will soon find out whether that silence was tactics or preparation for something far larger. This is Professor Jian Wei Explains. If this information was valuable to you, you know what I need from you. Subscribe, activate the bell, and share this video with whoever you believe needs to see the other side of this war. See you very soon with more revelations. This is not over, it is barely beginning. And before you go, let me share something that the analyses of the major networks forget with a convenience that can no longer be coincidence. On March 30th, an Iranian missile penetrated Turkish airspace. It was the fourth such incident since the start of the conflict. NATO's air defense shot it down over Turkish territory. What does that mean exactly? It means the geography of the war is widening, that every time a projectile crosses the wrong border, the risk of a miscalculation that drags in a third actor multiplies exponentially. NATO does not want to enter this war, but the war can enter NATO without anyone deciding it, without anyone authorizing it, simply because the geometry of chaos does not respect diplomatic borders. On March 31st, Washington officially acknowledged that in the Iranian attack on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, American personnel were wounded and aircraft were damaged. That is the official version. The unofficial version, the one circulating among military analysts who prefer not to sign with their real names, speaks of far more severe damage, of a base that will not recover full operational capacity for weeks. And all of this while Trump insists victory is imminent. I ask you, what kind of victory accumulates wounded soldiers in Saudi Arabia, missiles over Turkish soil, ships that cannot cross the strait without paying $500,000 in yuan, and Israeli cities going dark under the rubble of their own failed defense systems? The answer is yours. And it is also the answer of the millions of people across Asia, Europe, and the Americas who are paying for this war with the price of gasoline, with the price of bread, with the price of the gas that heats their homes. Because in the end, and this never changes in any war between powers, those who pay the highest bill are never the ones who make the decisions. The ones who always pay are us. Save this video. Share it. Because very soon, when the major networks are forced to admit what you already know today, I want you to remember that you heard it here first. The world that comes after this war will not resemble the one that existed before. And whoever understands that today has an enormous advantage over whoever still trusts that the primetime newscasts are telling them the complete truth.